Hello everyone, my name is Travis Creighton. For my film movement project, I got selected the British New Wave film movement. So first, I'm going to go over the history and influential contributors of this movement. Then I will go on to explain what the purpose of this movement was and what they were really trying to accomplish. Lastly, I'm going to give my analysis of the sporting life, and we'll end with some examples of modern movies that the British New Wave film movement inspired. The British New Wave film movement used what was deemed kitchen sink realism in its films. Kitchen sink realism is a term used to describe art plays in film that were less theatric and more realistic and often portrayed its subjects showing the stresses of banality of life. The movement lasted from 1959 to 1963. Leading up to the start of the British New Wave, Britain was struggling economically after World War II. Britain had been forcing its citizens to ration almost all goods during and after the war. The last rationing finally ended 9 years after the war in 1954. Another thing that was hurting Britain's citizens, especially the middle class, was the tax rate. The tax rate was actually twice back then compared to what it is now in Britain. And then there was also the housing shortages, which was due to the scarcity of manpower and materials from post-war damages. All these events really took its toll on the working class, and I think they felt it was finally time for the rest of society to see their everyday struggles and stresses on the big screen. Now, for influential members, there were several of them. First, we have Tony Richardson. He had co-founded this production company called Woodfall Film Production. Woodfall, the production agency, they produced some of the most prominent movies of the British New Wave, such as Look Back in Anger, Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, and The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner. Next, we have Lindsay Anderson. He actually directed The Sporting Life, and he had started out as a documentary filmmaker, which I believe through the research I did that almost a lot of these British New Wave directors started their careers out as in the documentary film era. And then I'm going to pronounce this guy's name wrong probably, but third we have Carol Rees. He, like I said previously, also started out as a documentary filmmaker, and his first feature film was Saturday Night and Sunday Morning. And it also seemed like all three of these directors were close friends with each other, knew each other, and they often worked together on each of their own films. So I thought that was interesting. So goals. What was the goal of the British New Wave film? The movement really sought out to portray the working class man and family. Films had the goal of showing real imagery of how the working class lived and the struggles they dealt with every day. Previously, the working class was often viewed stereotypically for comedic relief. They would be portrayed in films, but not accurately. The actors in these films were actually more dramatic and attempted to show real emotion to try and get you to feel what they're feeling, which we've all been learning about how it seemed like every new movement, their goal mainly was to seem more real, less theatric, really get you involved in the film. And these I have three screenshots here from the movie I watched, Sporting Life. And I chose these because of the emotion that's captured in each one of these screenshots. So, yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I chose to watch the film The Sporting Life. The film's main actor, he's a coal miner turned kind of like a professional rugby player. His name is Frank Machen. And then back then, the rugby would be comparable to like an NFL team today. Frank, he's living with a widow. Her name is Miss Hammond, and her 2 young children. Frank is in love with Miss Hammond, but she's still in mourning over her husband's suicide. So throughout the movie, Frank is just trying to impress Miss Hammond with his newfound fame and money from his rugby career. However, though, Frank is a very violent person, on and off the rugby field. To me, it seemed he didn't really know of any other way to express his feelings other than through the use of violence and physical force. There are numerous scenes in the movie where Frank gets really mad at Miss Hammond, will throw and break things, and eventually gets to the point where he starts hitting her. And then I don't know what really happened, but later on in the movie, there's a kind of like a love-making scene, kind of like the one that's pictured on the poster here, at the bottom right, where it almost seemed like he was forcefully having sex with her, like it was almost like rape. So that was kind of weird. Yeah, and then at the end of the movie, Miss Hammond, she gets tired of his behavior and kicks him out, and soon after she dies from like a brain hemorrhage, leaving Frank alone by himself, which is the worst thing you can imagine for Frank, because the only thing he really ever wanted in his whole life, even though he had his fame through rugby career, he wanted Miss Hammond. He wanted to be in a relationship with her because he was in love with her, and now he was never going to be able to get that. Felt that this movie falls right into what the British New Movement set out to accomplish. With the very intense emotional arguments between Frank and Miss Hammond, the real struggles you see Mrs. Hammond having to deal with to survive as a widow with 2 children. Most of the scenes came off as realistic as they could have been back then, but there were a few parts that did come off a little theatrical, in my opinion. But yeah, so on the next slide, I have a quick scene from the movie. I chose this scene because of how emotional and real it felt for me. This scene is the moment Frank is recruited to the professional rugby team, and he's bragging to Miss Hammond about it and how much money they paid him for the recruiting and the sign-on bonus and stuff like that. And then you'll see Mrs. Hammond's reaction.
Go on. Oh, well, I better tell you, since you're so keen. £1,000.
You're a great aid.
You don't believe me? Look, I've got the check here in my pocket. £1,000 in letters and in numbers. Signed, sealed and delivered, Frank Mershall. They drove me home in their car, a bloody Bentley.
Very good.
You don't sound very excited about it.
It's a bit more than I got when my husband died.
Well, isn't that right bloody handsome of you?
You wouldn't have to do anything for it.
You mean I didn't have to get killed for it?
Some people have life made for them.
That's right, Mrs. Hammond, and some people make it for themselves. It's about time you took that ton of rock off your shoulders. Don't wait any
copy.
For modern examples, I actually kind of struggled with that because, I did some research on trying to find exactly what movies were inspired by that British New Wave. There really wasn't a lot out there, and I really didn't have the time to go and watch a bunch of movies. But one movie I did find, I guess, was this movie called I, Daniel Blake. Now, I've actually never seen this, but it is a British movie, and I, read a brief description of the movie and watched the trailer. And it's actually about this guy right here, this older gentleman named Daniel Blake, and he's a carpenter, and I guess he gets sick or he's injured. Anyways, he can no longer work, so now he's trying to live off the welfare system, or has to live off the welfare system. And it kind of shows like how difficult that really is. If you're a working class individual, but now you can no longer work, it's not that easy to just go and try and live off welfare. Like, it's really strict, and he has a hard time with it. And then he goes and he finds this, or they kind of run into each other, I guess, another woman who's a single mom. So it's just kind of about their struggles, and in the trailer, like, there's some really intense emotional scenes, and this movie came out in 2016, so it's going to be pretty realistic as it is, but I can just tell from the trailer it's one of those movies that probably really hit you in the gut with your emotions. Might have to hold some tears back or something, I don't know, but yeah, that's my example.